and gentlemen, welcome. I'm thrilled to welcome our distinguished speaker, Ron McFarland, a highly regarded business consultant and speaker with a remarkable journey as a long-standing and respected open organization community ambassador. Ron is not only an expert in strategy, community, open source, and cooperatives, but also a prolific contributor to the world of open organizations. But I'll let Ron share about himself.
Since I was 18 years old, I was interested in business management, basically, more about management than business. I really wanted to get manage a group or organize a group to achieve something. And that's where I gradually became interested in business management. The motivating guy, particularly on the ground floor, people who have assignments, people who have tasks, and I like to manage them in a way that achieves something. And that's vaguely how it all started. So that was my first degree. And now I'm a Californian, originally a United States citizen. As I said, I have a business degree there. After I graduated from university, my first management job was in a department store, and I was managing, mostly, honestly speaking, a lot of women how to sell within a store showroom and in a store. It was retail sales basically.
Mhm.
So basically, it was a very, very large American chain. It's gone now. It was called FW Woolworths, and they had something like 4,000 stores all over the United States. And I was in one of those stores and I was assistant manager. But I found myself very, very interested in these items coming from all over the world. And that's what got me interested in not just management, but international business, international connection, and management on an international scale. And that's where I started studying Japanese and learning Japanese. That led me to come to Japan. And honestly speaking, I came to Japan in 1976, and I've been here ever since.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've been here something like 40 something years. And during that time, I went to graduate school, which was in international business. And then I went into a large corporation. It was called Isuzu Motors. It was a truck company, and
Mhm.
it's affiliated with General Motors. And the first 3 or 4 years of that, I was just involved with actually language training within the company, but it led to get involved with overseas sales training. So my job was to go around the world giving sales training to salesmen who are selling trucks. And I got the feeling that that is where um, open leadership really plays an important role, because these salespeople are mostly on commission. They're commission salespeople. That means they work for themselves. And the manager of that group, he has to hire those people, he's got to train those people, and of course, he's got to supervise their daily activities. Now, when I talk about sales training, there's two parts to it. One is just learning the product itself, the features on the product itself, and what those features would be interesting to the public. So you got to think about the customer, you've got to think about the product and the features on the product, and of course you've got to think about the competitor. Are they better than ours? Are they worse than ours? What features are really good for us? What is good for the competitors? We had to learn those things. So that is basic product training. Sales training is very, very different. Sales training is, how do you find a customer? Once you find the guy, what do you say to him? How do you meet him? Once you meet him, what questions do you ask? What information do you get from him? Then you guide him from what the information you get from the customer. Then you're going to learn, all right, this is the product I'm going to select. These are the features I'm going to talk about, and see if he's interested. And it'll go through actually, you select the vehicle, then you present the vehicle from a catalog or something like that, and then you say, okay, you give a demonstration. You actually let the customer drive the vehicle and feel the features. After that, you're going to get into negotiation, and then you make the sale. Once you make the sale, then you move in, okay, I've got to deliver it to the customer. When I deliver to the customer, actually what I'm doing is confirming that he wants the vehicle, confirming that he's wants those features. And also, I'm going to introduce him to the service department. And that's going to be the start of their sales process because they're going to take care of the service, the vehicle. So that's what you do at the delivery point. And then he drives away with the vehicle. He's happy. Then you follow that customer to make sure he's happy. Everything you said was true. He's happy with the vehicle and such. And hopefully that will lead to repeat business. It'll a referral business. And of course, it's confirming that you made the customer happy. So I just took you through the whole sales process. Now, think about that from open leadership. I am leading the customer, but he's outside of my company. And he may be giving me referrals for new customers, but he's still outside of the company. So, in a sense, I'm working as a leader, guiding him through the process of using this vehicle. So, you can see how it goes outside of your company, how important open leadership is. And what I just told you, actually, I did not have someone come to me in Isuzu Motors and say, I want you to do sales training. What happened was there was a problem in Isuzu for overseas business because the vehicles had a hard time selling and our prices are quite high. So the customer will always say, I want a lower price or I can't sell. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to find out if the salespeople really knew how to sell first. And then if they were really good at selling, then we can talk about pricing and comparison, competitors and such. So that's where the need for training came up. And I actually promoted myself. And I went around my boss to top management. And I said, I think I can do this because I was teaching a lot before that time. I was teaching in graduate school, English to business people around Tokyo and such. So that all led into it. So you can see I really created the job, which is the job of an open leader. He's creating a job. He's creating a community. And I think one of your questions was one of our five principles of transparency, inclusivity, adaptability, collaboration, and community. I think community is the most difficult because that's the starting point.
Mhm.
The leader comes up with a purpose or a concept or a need or a problem that he wants to address. Then he starts looking, he or she, I apologize, he or she starts looking for people who also has that same desire or goal or purpose and such. And so he's building this community. Once he builds the community, then he can start work on transparency and inclusivity and adaptability and collaboration. So that's how it all kind of starts.
I mean, I just want to pause for a moment to think about, what you just described. We always talk about the characteristics in conversations, and the community tends to often, show up towards the end as like, because it's still not really understood in businesses how community works, because the term in itself is still needs to be demystified. But when you say that, if we begin with community, it just makes so much sense because everything and every other characteristic sort of fall in line with it. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that's a quite an insight for me today.
We're using the term community. It could be a group, it could be a team, it could be a task force, it could be just any kind of group,
Yeah.
really, any kind of assembly of people that want to do the same, that want to address the same problem or issue or something like it. So we're using the term community, but here again, it we could use a lot of words to
Yes.
define that.
Yeah, we were doing the same with our customers when we had to explain because sometimes the word in itself could be misunderstood or associated with different meanings depending on the social cultures that people were coming from. And just the way you described that community can be a group of people coming together with and either creating a common objective or they already have a pre-existing goal that they align towards, right? And then the mechanics of openness come into play, and that's where the other remaining characteristics then start playing, and that's the game changer, right? That for me is really profound because that's a little different from top-down hierarchical ways of working. But here we're really allowing for people to think independently, to collaborate openly, and these are the characteristics of transparency, inclusivity, adaptability, and which makes, and transparency, of course, which makes a difference on how this community not only survives but really thrives.
Article, I don't remember if it's 2 parts or 3 parts, but it was adaptive leadership. And in that case, imagine a case where you have a boss, and the boss is technically superior, really good. Technically, he is really knowledgeable, has a lot of experiences, and his staff doesn't have that much experience. So, for example, he could, if it is a very technical problem and he knows the answer to the problem and he knows how to do it, he just can't do it himself. So he wants to delegate that to a lot of people. That's a simple top down type of thing. But here again, the goals and problems and such are very, very clearly defined. So it's easy for the leader to just say, you do this, you do this, you do this. I already know the outcome if you do it well. That is a simple tactical problem. But what is the case where the leader himself really doesn't know the, in today's world, problems are becoming so complicated that the boss rarely knows all of the solutions. Rarely. Where in old time, when the process is, you're working on the farm and you've got to milk the cow, and it's very, very simple. You know what to do. You tell someone to go milk the cow. It's really, really simple. But in today's world, those simple tasks they're automated away, they're done very, very easily and such. So those are becoming lesser important. The more complicated, difficult problems are starting to come up, and the leader really cannot just tell people what to do. And if they does tell people what to do, more than likely they're going to be doing things that may be counterproductive or not productive at all.
Yeah, and Ron, that's a good point. I think this is also important for leaders and organizations to understand that there is a shift in how leaders lead, because there is so much complexity, and with the volatility and the uncertainty that's existing around, even the best of professionals probably don't have that perspective, and the shift is also not it's about, when you say that this has to be a change in the mindset, it also means that the definition of what leadership is, it is changing. And this means that leaders have to allow for themselves, or give themselves the permission not to know it all, that they don't have to be the people who provide all the answers. The fact that organization hire um, talented, experienced, qualified professionals, especially in the knowledge economy, the idea is to mine into their knowledge, and those are the skills and competencies that leaders need to develop, is not to give the answers to all these smart people, but really leverage their expertise and knowledge to come with solutions which are decided together. And that's the skill. It's not about you knowing it all, it's not about you being perfect, it's not about you delegating, but really trusting the individuals and the community to come up with solutions, letting go of old ways of thinking and working as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned sales training a few minutes ago. Maybe I'd elaborate a little bit on that. Because imagine I came to a training center, and in the training center, here again, they had this overseas sales problem. And so I studied this, and General Motors was helpful on the sales side. And then, of course, the engineering people were helpful on the product training side. And I developed a seminar, and this was 1985. I gave my first seminar, and I did that for about 15 years. Your point, believe me. What happened is I gave my first seminar, and this was to obviously our dealers. It was not our own company. I was giving it to our customer. So I'm training our customer so they will sell our vehicles to the user. So what I was, and it started in Singapore, then went to Malaysia, then went to Central America, and it started growing around the world. Now I had a boss that didn't know what I was doing. He could barely even speak English. Of course, I was speaking in Japanese at that time. So he's feeling a little bit nervous because he cannot tell me what to do because he doesn't know what I'm doing. and he doesn't know what is successful. So I promised my boss, I am going to make you look good as much as I possibly can. All you have to do is make sure that I'm able to write my seminars and able to travel. I didn't even need his budget. I got my budgets from the sales departments, not our training department. So I was able to do this. But if he could just create an environment where I could continue to do it, and that's all he had to do. And when I was reporting back to him, it was basically things: how many people were in the room, what was the product, and such, what were the concerns, and I would write a little report each time I came back from a business trip. And he reported to, obviously, to his boss. But the sales department, they were like my customer, even though we're in the same company. I was working in a sense in an open way because I was working more with other departments, and I was doing other departments' job more than my own. And my own in personnel department, which is simply language training. So you can see I was like in working in an open way, but we didn't call it open in that time.
That's
It
really
just was.
no, this is really interesting because when you were speaking, I was actually creating this visual in my head. So, and it also reminded me of Jim Whitehurst, one of the quotes where he references about the leader's job is to create a context and let people do the job. Leaders should get out of the way. So once you had that context created for you, a couple of things that I observed is like you were collaborating cross functionally, which means to collaborate you need to network and build those relationships, and in the process you're building trust with people. Large part of it is an aspect of being proactive. What I'm hearing is that you took that initiative, and I think an aspect of open leadership is that there is an amount of proactivity, or a level of proactivity that is expected, and instead of being told, instead of being governed, you are stepping up and you're taking some of those actions. And I think that that's what kind of makes this a very unique model in itself, right? So it works in tandem with, of course, the leaders and the stakeholders creating the space, but and the individuals, and for them to thrive through is they also have to step into that arena and do their bit, build those relationships, build that trust, take initiative, connect, be proactive, and work hard like you did. You were continuously doing something and coming up with ideas and innovating. That's incredible. You seem to
Sure.
have a very unique experience working in different cultures all around the world. You come from the US, you lived in Japan, you've also traveled across. You mentioned LATAM, and traveled to Africa and India, and so you have this really unique perspective and experience. When you look at open leadership and how it plays out in different regions, do you see any challenges? What are your insights? Can open leadership be applied to any part of the world? Is it region and culture agnostic?
My basic thought is our leader or our open organization principles are principles. They're global principles. There are things that you cannot say this culture doesn't care about it, but that culture really needs it. There may be levels of this is more important, not necessarily culturally, but environmentally. Maybe one, for example, there's a lot of tribalism around the world. I mean, the tribalism now.
Mm.
Think about Africa, think about tribes, or you can think about the communities with India, where with one community, they don't talk to another community so much. And so in the developing countries, that is a big, big problem.
Mm.
So adaptability, inclusivity, that is much, much more important for the developing world.
Mm.
But the other ones are also important. Now, in sales training, honestly speaking, I had major enemies is too strong a word. Let's say people who were not really convinced that sales training was important. They were saying Isuzu Motors cannot give sales training overseas because all the cultures are different, the languages are different, the religion is different. So therefore, every sales situation is different. Therefore, you can't do it. But There are basic principles that can go across every culture. For example, if you are a salesman anywhere in the world, is it important to meet a lot of people or not meet a lot of people? Obviously, the more people you meet, the better the chance of you selling. So that is not culturally connected. It could be anywhere. Also, when you meet a customer, do you want to make a good impression or a bad impression? Obviously, you want to make a good impression. Now, how you do that's going to change by every culture, but you still want to make a good impression. So, for example, in my early seminars, I'm walking in the room in a suit and tie. Everyone else is in t shirts. And I realize that I am not dressed properly for this group. So, right in front of the group, I take off my jacket, I take off my tie. And I started to say, listen, I want to work through this problem with you. I don't want to be the boss telling you what to do. Honestly, you know your market and you know your customers better than I do. I just know principles. So, for example, you should want to make a good impression, right? Doesn't matter about the culture. If a customer is going to buy something, would he rather know a lot about the product or know nothing about the product? Here again, if the salesman explains the features in very detailed form better than the competitors do about their vehicle, you're going to be more competitive. Culture or religion has nothing to do with it. See, these
Hmm.
are principles. They're global principles, and I stuck on those principles. Now, how you do that, and I know throughout a lot of the Middle East, not all the countries, but for example, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, those people are very quiet people. The Egyptians and the Palestinians, they're noisy, talkative people. The Indians are talkative. You know that already. But anyway, so I have got to be extra quiet with those people, give him a lot of time to think about my question, and let him talk. And usually it's one on one. You can't do it in a group. They're a little bit different. So, how I interact with, how I get information to the customers, because he would be like an introverted person.
Hmm.
More of the Japanese are more like that. The Japanese, so you've got to be here again, you've got to be careful on asking questions, being quiet, and listening carefully.
Hmm.
You've got to control how much you talk with those cultures.
Hmm.
and and you've got to very carefully ask questions and then slowly they will give you the information. In a very talkative market, the United States or India, you don't hardly have to ask the question. He's going to tell you immediately, I want this and I want this and I want this. You don't even have to, as a salesman, you don't even ask the question. He's going to tell you voluntarily before you even ask the question. So the culture is are different. So your style is going to differ, and that's why I wrote another article on personality types. Personality types. You're again an introverted person and a very extroverted, talkative person. That can go through any culture as well, and you can find out what that degree is. Once you find out you do, you adapt your here again your management style to that environment,
Hmm.
not necessarily a given country, but a region very similar. And I always like to compare, for example, the Egyptians. That's a Arabic speaking country.
Hmm.
You compare them to the Saudi Arabians. They're different people. Egypt has a huge population. Saudi Arabia has a very small population. They're Bedouin people. They live in the desert,
Hmm.
or that's where they're originally from. So their cultures are different. You've got one who is very extroverted, the other is very introverted. I have to change my style to adapt to those two. There's no
Yes.
good or they're bad, it's
Yeah.
just a different environment, but I'm changing the style. You see? So, and it's the same with our open organization principles. They all will apply. Some will be more important than others, but they'll all apply.
Yes, I think this is the examples you have given are very relevant and I think very reflective as well. What I can draw out from there is that uh, these principles are like universal principles, and then when you show up as a leader, and for us, just to clarify for our audience, at least at Red Hat, the approach we had was that leader is not only someone who has position in the hierarchy high up in the system, but anyone who is willing to practice these principles becomes an open leader. It has this element of proactivity and the willingness to lead irrespective of title and position. So when you gave these examples, what is standing out to me is that um, to be adaptable, and that's why this principle is so important and shows up in open leadership, is that scan your environment, look around, look at the style, look at the behaviors, look at the culture, look at the people, whoever you're interacting with, either in groups or with individuals. You have to adapt your style to suit the style that matches with that group, individual, or that culture or that country. And that requires mindfulness. You're bringing with these examples and experiences and the stories that you've shared, the whole aspect or the concept of open leadership to life. They're just not principles anymore. When you talk about adaptability, you can see exactly how and where it has to be applied. I even love the example that you gave when you were in the sales training, where you found that even the way people dressed mattered and you were agile. I think agility is another aspect of it, to take decisions faster on the spot and in that moment of time. um, and you decided to like take off your jacket and the tie and fit in, and that was part of, I think, not only being adaptable to the group but also to be inclusive. You also have to take certain actions, and not wait for someone to invite you to do that. And again, I am seeing that a lot is required from the individual to practice open leadership, to give yourself permission. Otherwise, we are so trained in the way we've been brought up to follow certain rules and regulations and how we should behave, that often, even if we realize that there is a dissonance in how we should show up, we don't take decisions fast enough, and only in retrospect we we think about it and change. So we don't have to sit and wait for that. It's a changing world, it's a fast-paced world, and these are the small things that make a huge difference in mobilizing the community, but also implementing aspects of open leadership and principles of open organization. Thank you
Yeah,
for.
one of the most important, getting back to that simple example of making a good impression, one of the biggest problems about making the way you dress, honestly, if you like the clothes or dislike the clothes, that is not important. That is not what you want. For example, I like to wear uh, expensive clothes. So therefore, I'm going to buy expensive clothes because I like expensive clothes. But the problem is, what you like doesn't matter. It's who looks at you that matters.
Hmm.
You're not looking in the mirror all the time because you like your fancy clothes. So your opinion really doesn't matter. What matters are the people looking at you. That's what matters. And when they look at you, you have to think about two things. One is, are you dressed nice enough so he feels he's someone to look, he feels that you are someone to look up to.
Hmm.
So that's number one. So you're making a good impression. The second thing is, are you relaxing him
Hmm.
so he will talk to you? If you're dressed too nice, too fancy and such, he maybe have a good impression. Wow, he's really good looking or something. But he may be a little bit nervous to talk.
Hmm.
So you want to keep it so you keep it at a level just slightly better or about the same level of dress to keep him relaxed
Hmm.
but keep him interested.
Hmm.
And so that's an example of, here again, how I am trying to get him to collaborate more.
Hmm. It
Now,
it sounds
getting back to,
about it sounds more like, what is the intent you're going there with? Is it to impress, or is there something else? And I think that's where the objectives become important to think about when you're interacting or when you're collaborating or when you're co-creating or innovating together with customers, with partners, or with within your own groups. What is the intent? I think if the intent is not clear, we can get distracted by aspects which are not relevant at all.
Yeah, and one of the problems is, for example, the leader is going to know, for example, he might know 70% of what to do.
Hmm.
30% he doesn't know what to do about. Now, I remember when I gave a seminar, usually uh, I kept my groups at maximum 20 people.
Hmm.
More than 20 people, I can't control the group. I've got to keep it under 20 so we can get a two-way discussion. Best is 9 or 10 people.
Hmm.
Now, among the 9 or 10 people, there's going to be 1 or 2 people. They're going to be the best salespeople, and then you're going to have a few that say they have a bad attitude, and then you got a few people that are brand new. They don't know what's going on here. So what I would try to do is I would ask a question to the group, and hopefully one of those real good salespeople, he knows the customer the best, and I would direct all my attention toward him, and I say, please explain to the group why these features are so important.
Hmm.
What are your customers saying? Because he knows the customers the best because he's the best salesman. What is the customer saying about these features? Let him, in a sense, take over the leadership job. I don't want to be the leader anymore. I
Hmm.
want him to be the leader, talking to the group because he knows the local market the best. And so I don't want to be the leader at that time. I can get into my general principles later. But in terms of local situations, I've got to find out what it is from the best salespeople because they will know, and they're going to be teaching the young people. They're going to be teaching the guys with a bad attitude. They are going to be the leader, and I'm trying to direct my attention toward those people. And I am stepping back, as you say, and I'm letting them take over as you might say, the
Hmm.
instructor.
Yes, so that sounds like in cases where people are self-aware, self-confident to be able to step back, it's easier for them. But we have also seen, in my experience as a coach and as a facilitator, sometimes we are also fixated with having the spotlight on ourselves. So, and no judgment, but let's say these people who think it's necessary for them to be in the spotlight or to be driving everything, but they do want to become better open leaders. How could you? What advice would you give to them on how to let go, how to have this, handing over this leadership to someone else, even if it's momentarily? What do they have to dabble with, and what can they do to make it easy? Because it doesn't come naturally to everyone. While it's easy to speak about, so I would love to hear your view on that and maybe some guidance around it.
I think one of the things you have to build up your own level of confidence. For example, in my early seminars, I'm looking at my textbook, and this is all the material itself is new for me too. I've studied it and studied it. Obviously, I wrote the manual. I wrote the manual, but you know, just writing the manual and being able to present it to a group, that's a different
Hmm.
story. That requires practice. It's kind of like you learn this is a steering wheel and this is a gear shift, but the more you practice driving, the better you get at it. So without that practice, you're going to be stumbling around and you're going to
Hmm.
turn too much or something like that. So gradually, when I started giving my seminars, I was noticing I'm looking at the material so much I can't see the group.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they're sleeping. I don't know if they're really interested. I don't know. I don't know if they're bored. Uh, because I am so concentrated on the material.
Hmm.
And then after a while, after I given 3 and 4 and 10 and 20 and 50, and I was giving about, I don't know, maybe years. So after that many times, you don't even look, I don't even look at the manual anymore. I
Hmm.
look at one word and then I start talking.
Hmm.
And then while I'm talking, I'm watching the group because everything is on automatic pilot. Now, as I watch the group, then I'm getting information from the group. And so that's where when I got information in that group, then I can learn. I've got to redirect to this. I've got to redirect this. And I knew that I did not know the local market like the people in the room did. I
Hmm.
just flew in. I just came in 2 days ago to this particular country and such. So I don't even know the roads. I knew that I had to redirect, and I didn't know how to do that. So the more confidence I built up, the more experience I had and practice that I had and rehearsals that I had, the easier it is for me to relinquish that leadership. It
Hmm.
became easier and easier. If I have low confidence, then I'm going to be protect myself. It's
Hmm.
like the guy who has a job, and he's some people, it's the only job he has. If he loses that job, he's going to starve. He's going
Hmm.
to die.
Hmm.
But another guy, let's say he has the same job, but he has the potential to develop many jobs and many connections. So
Hmm.
he could be much more open. I noticed that a lot of salespeople, if they have a steady income, or if they have, let's say they're financially secure. Sometimes it's the wife working. Sometimes he has a very well-to-do family and such. Those people tend to find customers easier than someone who is under so much financial stress that 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 he can't even feel the customer. All he can feel is, I've got to make a sale or else I'm going to be in trouble. So he's feeling his problem so strongly that he can't feel the problems of the customers. And the customers don't buy because they want you to make a sale. They buy it because that particular product or service is something that they need and want. Now you have to find out what that need and want is. That means you have to be more open,
Hmm.
and you cannot more open. Be open if you're under financial stress, and I can feel that in the room sometimes. I
Hmm.
can feel these people under financial stress, and unfortunately, the person who financially needs the sale the most, he can't sell because he can't hear the customer.
Hmm.
He's under too much stress. So if he has less stress, then he can start to look out. We tend to focus when we have any kind of fear. We
Hmm.
tend to focus our attention on that particular thing we're afraid of.
Yes.
If our fear goes down, then we can start to look around for opportunities, and the opportunities start to come out, and the ideas come out, and the ideas lead to good ideas.
Hmm.
He said, I hate your idea, but you brought up an issue that we have to address to find the good idea.
Hmm.
And without the bad idea, the good idea, it doesn't come. So that's what I see about more and more openness. So those are the things will make you more open. And then you're here again, you're going to be able to relinquish a lot of the leadership, particular leadership in particular tasks to other people. And my bosses in Isuzu Motors, they were very good at that, very good at letting me just do things. And then here again, I'm going to protect him as much as possible without his creating the environment that I had, even though he couldn't do what I was doing.
Hmm.
They did mostly create the environment where I was successful, and I would be praising him for him creating that environment for me.
Yeah.
And of course, he was reporting to his bosses and
Hmm.
such. I don't have to go around them or anything like that.
Hmm.
So in a sense, he was making a leadership communication channel, which
Yeah.
was important.
Yes. Now, what you said is really profound. You mentioned fear, and I think it reminds me of our experience when we were engaging with our customers at Red Hat during their digital transformation journeys or their app modernization journeys. We had brought in the aspect of open leadership as an experience, right? I mean, one could say, why for something like a digital transformation you require to bring in, introduce open leadership and work with the leaders in helping them mitigate their fears or help them understand is because we recognize that those transformations are all about change, and anything to do with change is will always mostly touch upon fear factors, and this could show up differently in different people. And large part of our engagements included talking about aspects of fear. Also building a strong character. So to become an open leader, there is you have to build skills and competencies, but you also have to build a strong core, which can help you sail through, because there is so much of ambiguity that you're working with. And also the fear of, like you said, relinquishing leadership or relinquishing power, because one of the things is that when you're working in a community, suddenly you're not in the spotlight, and you have the community sort of driving those initiatives. They are taking decisions, and there are times that the product leaders, product managers, organization leaders, they can start feeling irrelevant in that process, and that can be a scary space. A lot of leaders that I coach with, this thing came up. It's like, what am I doing here? Why do I need to be here? And this is where they need to understand that, while these leaders are bringing knowledge, power, competence, they're setting the context, but when they're tapping into the knowledge of people, what they're doing is that they're creating shared leadership. And this is where, again, it goes back to the intent and the outcomes that you're looking for. But to manage this, all of this requires that you go within and see and work on yourself. So self-awareness was a big part of our experiences at in our open leadership engagements, and you've touched upon. And fear always came up, although different words would be used, because to fit into the corporate scenario, you can't talk so openly about fear at a personal level, but we did deal with those issues so that they could show up as better leaders.
Yeah. Imagine this. Imagine a case where I have an idea and I want to turn that into a project. Now, and maybe I'm afraid to present that project because it may fail.
Hmm.
So I'm afraid, particularly in a group where nobody knows what to do, everyone's quiet. And I said, I've got an idea for a project. And so I lay down my project and I call that my A plan. Let's say we start a team, we start working through our A plan. We're going through that. Now, no plan from the initial stage stays exactly the same. As the project goes along, you have to adapt and change and modify and such. And maybe I have to think ahead because it won't stay the same. Something is going to ruin my
Hmm.
plan. Let's say I have a B plan.
Hmm.
My A plan, that's what I want to do. But there's a potential that, so three things may affect my plans. So each one of those, I'm going to have a B plan. So I have these three plans. So what does that do if I have those three alternate plans? I don't want to do it, but if these three bad things happen, then I'm going to adopt automatically my stress goes down. What I'm talking about is anticipation.
Hmm.
Before it happens, I am prepared. So that's the second. So I've got my A plan, I got my B plan. What about my project is a complete failure? I
Hmm.
mean, is worthless. It has no value whatsoever to the point where you're going to lose your job. Call that the Z plan. This
Hmm.
is a total failure plan. Have a plan for that. All
Hmm.
right, I'm going to lose my job. That means I'll probably have to sell my house. I might have to live with my parents. I might have to take my children out of the expensive school and they have to go to public school. I plan for it. Now, armed with the plan, exactly what I said before, where does the stress go? It
Hmm.
goes away.
Course, it seems like what you're saying is, when you say anticipate, means think through, have foresight, imagine what you're wanting, and then you go into a state of planning, and you should have A and B plan, but you also need to have a C plan, which is really about a complete failure. And what it does is it mitigates stress, right? It removes stress. And we do know that stress is triggered by fears, and or fears can trigger stress. So if you're really good at thinking through clearly, anticipating, planning, you could offset a lot of those stress, and then you can proceed with more confidence. I believe this also includes and thinking through about risk, and how will you mitigate them. Now, this is in an ideal situation, I would say, or not ideal. I would say, like, this is a good plan the industries that you work in, and in a place like where digital transformation is taking place and there are technological advances, and we ourselves as industries and businesses are going into horizons and landscapes where we don't know what to plan for, right? So my question here is that when we don't know what to expect, how can we plan? I mean, we can anticipate to a certain point, but how could we plan? Because we have to course correct, and this is where we talk about agility and adaptability. So how do you compare these two situations? Could you explain a lot? Because while it's academically it makes sense to me what you said, but when we apply it, often we find that we as teams or organizations struggle to follow through.
One of the best things to do is I would here again, you've got this project from beginning to end. I would break it down into very, very small milestones as you move through, and then confirm if you're on the right track.
Mm.
So, for example, if I am a salesperson and I've got a customer, he's interested in my product, every time I give a fee, and I'm giving my presentation of the product, every time I give present a feature to the customer, I'll ask him, is that important for you? Is that not important for you? So I'm continually asking questions to
Mm.
make sure I'm on the right track and break it. If there's too much, let's say, unknown out there, I would keep those confirmations smaller and shorter so
Mm.
you can make adjustments quicker and not too drastic. It's minor iterations instead of some massive change. Like an open leader, I would be continually asking my group or my team, are we on the right track? Are you happy with what you're doing? What
Mm.
response are you getting? So that's where you would require, let's say, more meetings, more collaboration, more feedback, and in a shorter period of time.
Asking questions, what we've seen is, of course, leaders need to ask questions, but we also discovered that there has to be a psychologically safe space for the team members to ask questions. And sometimes these questions could be uncomfortable, these questions could be difficult. And when these questions are not asked, or there is where if the environment is not psychologically safe and those questions are not posed, there is more to lose than to gain. Because often we, again, when you're thinking of leadership, we're only thinking top down, or one central figure. But when we talk about community and open leadership in that context, we're saying that anybody in that community is a leader and should be asking questions. And the environment that the community is creating or a team is creating is very relevant for that. So the success of a project or a product, or the outcomes you're looking for, really depend on what is the kind of communication and exchange that's taking place. You've also mentioned about feedback, and feedback is not just one unidirectional. It has to be two ways. And of course, we can have a whole episode on feedback and the dynamics of it, because it does trigger us at emotional level, at psychological level. So here's a question for you, Ron. In a world that seems to be gravitating towards a lot of command and control and censorship, is it really possible to practice open leadership in today's world?
Honestly, I think it's going to be more important
Hmm.
simply because the assumption of working for a big company, a big profitable organization, the chance of you staying in that company for your entire career is getting less and less and less and less.
Hmm.
So people are beginning not only moving from company to company, they're going to be moving from profession to profession also.
Hmm.
So, for example, what I'm doing right now may be automated away. I am planning my job to be obsolete in the future. So, what am I going to do?
Hmm.
So, I think we should start planning for that now. And there's a series of articles that I've written strictly on startups,
Hmm.
startups, which is really like building a community, but it's building a community which will lead to building a company. The process of building a community and starting a startup business, they're very, very close. What we've got to do in the future, we've got to build networks. We've got to build mass communities of which Within that mass community, some people are going to be involved, some people may never be involved, but I want to have the potential to be able to contact them if I need to.
Hmm.
So that is going to be more and more important. So what is that? That is open leadership.
Hmm. Um, in your experience, Ron, are there any specific industries or businesses where open leadership is not suitable?
I would guess that the industries that would have a hard time with open leaderships, that those are that have to follow into very, very close legal guidelines.
Hmm.
For example, lawyers cannot be open about their clients.
Hmm.
They've got to be very careful with the information that they talk about their particular clients. A doctor cannot just openly try any kind of medical procedure. He has to
Hmm.
go through a lot of testing and that kind of thing. And you cannot just be totally open
Hmm.
about it. You've got to find out, well, how do you explore uh, the way forward? So I
Hmm.
would be very, very careful with some particular industries like that or professions like that.
Hmm. I think it goes back to the conversation we had earlier on, Ron, about the context and the environment where we are in. So at Red Hat, we used to use this term called the degrees of openness. And this is where the judgment and discernment of the leader or the community comes in as to what extent they can be open. And then within that context, because we worked with a lot of regulated companies and agencies where uh, data, privacy, confidentiality were of prime importance. And we said, and that's where we had to use judgment and discernment as to, okay, these are aspects that we cannot touch, and it's clear, but it's clear, the context is clear. We cannot, this is the black box, we're not going and touching it at all. And there are certain things that can be made open. And then, of course, the universality of the principles that stays the way it is, that you can be transparent, but there is a context. You can be adaptable, that there is a context, and then you take decisions together as a community.
Sometimes when you have a project on the team, there's some people that should be on the team and some people that should not be on the team. So we
Yes.
can think about that too. And
Yes.
who is going to lead here again, who work toward the goal, and some people who are not going to be helpful at all.
Hmm.
So you wouldn't want them in the team,
Yes, and
not
that
even
again.
as an observer, because they're going to influence the rest of the team. I would want members that all will have tasks, all will have goals within my team, or else I wouldn't want them on the team.
Hmm.
Now, some of the people may be an advisor. He may come from time to time just to give some advice, but he's not going to be one of the main people on the team. And each member, he may have people that he goes to for advice and such, but they're not on the team. But what I do not want is I do not want someone who is really not interested in the goal and the objective of the team.
Hmm.
And I've had cases where I've given sales seminars, and I want my salespeople to want to be salesmen.
Hmm.
I do not want someone in the room who really doesn't like meeting customers, because just an observer is going to influence the entire team
Yes.
and sometimes negatively
Hmm.
influence the entire team.
To me, it sounds like setting very clear expectations and building accountability around it as well. It's because often open organization, open leadership, due to the term itself, can be misunderstood because it's open. That means there are no guardrails. There's no accountability. It's all, I use the word country club and people describe it to me. And that's exactly what it is not. Open organization is not about not having enabling constraints or expectation setting. In fact, it's a very systematic process which needs to be followed through. And openness is the way we create an environment or a culture of openness is to facilitate those outcomes to be met, and not otherwise. There will be times that you have to take tough decisions. It's not about consensus. It's about the best ideas winning, no matter where they come from. But it also means as a leader or as a community, you have to set those expectations clearly for people to understand what is expected, which direction we are going in, how will the goals be accomplished, what needs to be done. And this goes back to the planning process that you had mentioned about.
For example, getting back to the sales situation, I
Mhm.
would tell what this is what we're going to do. This is our objective for this. Now, if anybody in the room is really not particularly interested, they can leave anytime.
Right.
But I've got to have some kind of team of at least 3 or 4 people with actual activities, actual desires, and actual certain disciplines.
Yeah,
I
we
want
we
those.
we call them as stream aligned teams, in our engagements, and coming from team topologies. We spoke about why it is important to have these stream aligned teams focused on the work. Of course, there's agility, but also the outcomes that could be achieved together, because in smaller teams, you're able to do more focused work and, of course, get to the outcomes and objectives sooner. So what kind of other challenges leaders and teams can expect to encounter when they embark on their open leadership journey, open ways of working, and open ways of leading, in your experience?
I've had challenges because, for example, I've got a given idea and people cannot really feel my idea and my goal and my desires.
Mm.
So I have to break it down into little pieces and demonstration of how vehicles can be sold. And then I go through this little process with someone. Instead of just running down, these are the steps that you need to sell something. And then you're getting a feeling for the value. Without that demonstration, that is a real challenge. I cannot talk about it theoretically. And then you know what I'm talking about.
When you mentioned about the demonstration, to me, it is also about the principle of transparency. Because when you're doing a demonstration, you're opening a space for things to be transparent, and that's where the opportunity is there to ask those questions we had spoken about, right? That's an opportunity for feedback, for input and exchange, for better collaboration. That's what I see. One of the challenges, of course, in our environment in IT, in product development, we've seen is a unicorn effect, where people like to have. Remember, I mentioned to you about the spotlight that people want to have. So we have these amazing, outstanding developers, right, who are unique, and for them to be part of the community, to collaborate, can be hard, because suddenly it's not all about them individually, but it's about the community. And that can trigger different kind of stress reactions, behaviors, counterproductive behaviors, different kind of it could lead to aggression or withdrawal symptoms. It could show up differently, right? So for them to feel relevant, because open leadership, this is where the challenge comes in, that you're not in the spotlight as an individual. It's really about the community, and the decision making is shared. But the beauty of that is that, when you have shared leadership and shared responsibility, you also offset the risk, right? You're not carrying the burdens by yourself, but you're really carrying through as a team. And that can be really relieving, having had the first hand experience of it. When we talk about open leadership in our engagements, we always say that be prepared, that while it sounds fantastic like every other concept, but when you dive into it, be prepared to be challenged. And I think most of the challenges come from within, your attitude, your mindsets, your the behavioral changes that have to be made. So, Ron, keeping in mind the time, I do want to touch upon about the open org community and introduce it to our listeners. So, a little background on that is that the Open Organization is a community-driven project which is aiming to transform how people work, manage, and lead through open principles. So, Ron, could you share some insights on the unique aspects of this community, and how it fosters a global conversation about organizational transformation, and anything that you can share?
Oh, one of the things I think everybody within the community has to have a degree of curiosity and, how do I say it, the ability to challenge the status quo. Some people do not want change, and other people really desire change. The people who do not want change because they're very comfortable with the way things are right now. The person who wants change is really bored with or dissatisfied with the way things are right now. And other people, honestly, they're not dissatisfied. but they just enjoy the adventure of something new. And I think most of the people who are in that open organization or open community, they are really seeking the new. They're not waiting for it to come. They're actually looking for it. And they're asking people about it. And they're curious about what's going to happen. What's going to happen in 20 years? 10 years ago, smartphones didn't exist. Everyone has a smartphone. And they're curious about that. You remember the old Windows computer. They thought Windows has 90% of the market. We might as well give up. But Windows is now replaced by Chrome operating systems, and people are not even turning on their computer anymore. I have a desktop right behind this laptop, and it's been sitting there. I rarely use it except to pick up a file that I had in there. Other than that, I rarely use it anymore. So here again, they're really the open organization mindset is someone who's really seeking the change. And our principles, here again, it'll cut through any industry.
Yes.
For example, Ben Owens, he does this strictly for education, and it's strictly for teachers who need to learn how to work with children. He is strictly in the education area using open organization principles. Here again, it could be healthcare. It could be IT, it could be a startup.
So basically, any industry or any business or any vertical that you come from, you're always welcome to explore the open organization community, which talks about the 5 guiding principles of the 5 characteristics of transparency, inclusivity, community, collaboration, and adaptability. Wrap up our section for today. Words of wisdom for our listeners around open leadership.
It's funny, the past we know very well, the future we don't know. And it's kind of scary sometimes. And what we initially think of may not be the best idea. So as we move forward, we have goals that we're moving in a given direction, but we're keeping an open mind for modifications along the way. Don't be afraid of those modifications. Actually expect and keep optimistic. The more optimistic you are, the more open you are. The more open you are, the more you can hear and feel and get a sense of where the opportunities will be. The more curious you are, the better, because that will lead you toward the future. And other people are just simply responding for what happens to them as opposed to doing their own, let's say, guiding.
Thank you, Ron. Great advice. As we bring our conversation on open leadership to a close, I want to express my heartfelt, sincere gratitude to you, Ron, for sharing valuable insights and perspectives. The discourse on open leadership is crucial in navigating the evolving landscape of effective leadership, and we appreciate your expertise in shedding light on this topic. Ron, we look forward to inviting you back on for some more amazing experiences and stories, especially the airplane crash story and leadership lessons learned. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope the discussion has sparked new ideas and considerations for your own leadership journey. Stay tuned for more enriching conversations on open leadership, open organizations, open culture, and more. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.